No hard feelings, right? Change is good. She said it with her feet propped up where mine had been for 8 years, her fingers drumming on the armrest like she'd already claimed it. Around us, 23 people chewed pastries and laughed, while bright pink letters spelled out exactly what they thought of me. I stood there holding my lunch bag, watching this woman wear my professional life like a costume she'd just tried on. The banner above her head read, "Thanks for nothing," and someone had brought balloons. Balloons. As if my departure was a birthday celebration, instead of a calculated removal. Nobody had told me I was leaving. Nobody had sent a message or scheduled a conversation. They simply decided I was finished and threw themselves a party to market. What kind of person celebrates someone's end while that person is still standing right there? What does it say about a workplace when they can laugh and eat cake 3 feet away from the woman they're erasing? Before going any further, thank you for being here. If this story is hitting something deep inside you, leave a comment below telling me about a time someone underestimated you. And please, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is going to make you rethink everything about loyalty and power. My name is Fallon, 34 years old, unmarried, no children. People always assumed that meant my life was empty, that I had nothing better to do than serve others. What they didn't understand was that I'd built something rare in my work. I wasn't just good at my job, I was irreplaceable at it. Or at least, I thought I was. Turns out, in their minds, anyone could do what I did. Anyone could manage him. The founding member. The 91-year-old man whose family had created this entire world 60 years ago and whose preferences were so specific that most people lasted 3 weeks before quitting. I'd lasted 8 years. 8 years of learning that he wanted his tea at exactly 3:47 p.m., because that's when his late wife used to serve it to him during their afternoon conversations. 8 years of understanding that he needed his newspapers ironed because the smell of fresh ink gave him headaches that lasted for hours. 8 years of knowing he folded his towels in thirds because his mother had taught him that way when he was 7 years old, and it was one of his last clear memories of her. These weren't random demands from a difficult old man. They were anchors. Rituals that kept him tethered to the people he'd lost and the life he'd built. I understood that. I respected it. And somewhere along the way, he'd started trusting me with pieces of himself that he didn't share with anyone else. The retreat itself was extraordinary. Nestled on 200 acres of protected land, it served maybe 40 members at most. These weren't people who needed another gym or spa. They had those. What they needed was a place where their privacy was absolute and their eccentricities were accommodated without question. Membership cost more than most people earned in 3 years, and there was a waiting list that stretched back a decade. 90% of those members had joined because he'd invited them personally. His network was the foundation of everything. I didn't just manage his preferences. I translated them to the staff, anticipated problems before they occurred, and made sure his experience was seamless. When he mentioned casually that the garden path was becoming uneven, I had it repaired before he walked it again. When he said the morning light was too harsh in the reading room, I ordered different window treatments and had them installed overnight. I didn't do this because I was subservient. I did it because I understood that excellence in service isn't about bowing and scraping. It's about paying attention. It's about caring enough to notice what someone needs before they have to ask twice. But caring doesn't matter when someone decides you cost too much. Management had been making noises for months about efficiency and modernization. They wanted someone who could split time between multiple members, who could handle administrative work and member relations simultaneously. They wanted to pay one person less, instead of paying me what I was worth. I'd heard the whispers in the break room, seen the way the operations director looked at me during budget meetings. Still, I'd thought my track record would protect me. I'd thought 8 years of perfect service would count for something. I was wrong. They didn't even have the decency to fire me properly. They just hired my replacement, threw a party, and assumed I'd understand the message. The woman sitting where I used to sit was named Bryn, 26 years old, fresh from hospitality school, with a resume that bragged about her ability to multitask and innovate. She'd told someone during the party that she was excited to bring fresh ideas to the role, that it was time to modernize how things were done. She'd said this loudly enough that I heard it from the doorway. She had no idea what she was talking about. No idea that the entire retreat existed because of one man's vision and that honoring that vision was the only thing keeping the place alive. I looked at Bryn sitting in what used to be my spot, her bright smile and confident posture, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not even hurt anymore, just clarity. They'd made their choice. They'd decided I was disposable and she was the future. Now they'd get to see exactly what that choice meant. I walked toward the banner and picked up a small piece of vanilla cake. Bryn watched me approach, her smile widening like we were old friends instead of replacement and replaced. No hard feelings, right? She said again, gesturing at the decorations. Change is good. It certainly is, I replied. My voice sounded steady, calm. I ate the cake slowly, tasting nothing, and then I set my lunch, bag down on an empty chair. Enjoy everything. I walked out through the side entrance and drove home. That was Wednesday afternoon. I didn't go back Thursday, didn't go back Friday, didn't call, didn't text, didn't explain. They'd thrown me a goodbye party while I was still employed, so as far as I was concerned, they'd already decided I was gone. I was just agreeing with them. My phone started buzzing around noon on Thursday. 17 calls by Friday evening. I ignored every single one. What was there to say? They'd made their position clear with balloons and cake. What they didn't know was what I'd learned during those 8 years of paying attention. Our founding member, whose name was Carlisle, had very particular feelings about loyalty. His wife had been with him for 68 years before she died. 68 years of marriage, and in all that time, she'd never missed a single one of his birthdays or anniversaries. She'd never canceled plans with him for something better. She'd never made him feel like he was secondary to anything else in her life. After she died 2 years ago, something in him shifted. He became intensely focused on consistency and faithfulness. He started talking about how rare real loyalty was, how most people would abandon you the second something shinier came along. He told me this once while I was ironing his newspaper. He'd looked up from the book he was reading and said, "Fallon, I can forgive many things, mistakes, accidents, even incompetence, if the person is trying their best. But I cannot forgive betrayal. I cannot forgive disloyalty. When someone shows you they don't value you, believe them." I'd nodded, not really understanding why he was telling me this. Now I understood perfectly. He'd also been discussing his estate recently. The retreat existed on his family's property, land that had been passed down through 4 generations. He'd been planning to donate everything to a preservation trust after his death, ensuring the retreat would continue operating and everyone's jobs would be protected. But he'd mentioned to me privately, during one of our afternoon walks, that he was reconsidering. He wanted to make sure the legacy went to people who valued what it meant, people who understood loyalty. I'd never told anyone about these conversations. They weren't mine to share. They were private moments between him and someone he trusted. But now, sitting in my apartment on Friday evening, watching my phone buzz with increasingly frantic calls, I realized something. I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to plot or scheme or orchestrate some elaborate plan. I just needed to not be there. I just needed to let them show him exactly who they were, without me running interference. So that's what I did. I stayed home. I stayed quiet. And I waited to see what would happen when Carlisle arrived on Thursday morning and discovered I was gone. Monday morning, my phone lit up with a text from Gemma. She was one of the few people at the retreat who'd actually been kind to me, and she'd been on vacation during the party. The message came through at 6:47 a.m. "Fallon, what happened? The place is completely shut down. Everyone got termination notices. They're saying we have 30 days to clear out before the property sells. Please call me." I stared at the message for a long time before I responded. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something else, something that felt like vindication mixed with disbelief. I called her. She answered on the first ring. "Fallon?" Her voice was thick, like she'd been crying. "What is going on?" I came back from my trip and there are locks on the gates. Security told me the retreat is permanently closing. Everyone's employment is terminated, effective immediately. "How is this possible? Tell me what you heard," I said. She took a shaky breath. "They're saying Carlisle came in Thursday morning, asked for you specifically. They told him you'd left, that they'd hired someone better, someone more efficient." Bryn brought him his tea at 3:45. He didn't say anything, just waited. Then she brought his newspaper from the pile. He asked why it wasn't ironed. Fallon, she laughed at him. She actually laughed and said nobody irons newspapers anymore, that it was an outdated practice and wasteful. Then at lunch, she sat at the table next to his, started chatting with him about her ideas for modernizing the retreat, making it more accessible to younger members. I closed my eyes. I could picture it perfectly. Carlyle sitting there, watching this stranger dismantle everything he valued while calling it progress. What did he do? I asked, though I already knew. Nothing. He just stood up and left. But Friday morning, his lawyers arrived. By Friday afternoon, termination letters were delivered to everyone. The property is being sold to a private buyer. The retreat is done. 60 years of operation, gone in 2 days. What about the managers? I asked quietly. Gone. The operations director, the hospitality coordinator, everyone in leadership. Bryn got terminated too. And Fallon, here's the thing that's making everyone lose their minds. Carlyle specifically asked for the list of attendees from Wednesday's party. Someone had taken pictures, and they ended up getting sent to him somehow. Everyone who was at that party got fired. Everyone who wasn't got severance packages and recommendation letters. The people who celebrated your departure lost everything. The people who weren't involved got taken care of. My throat felt tight. How many people weren't at the party? 7. Out of 30 staff members, only 7 of us weren't there. We get 3 months severance and references. The other 23 get nothing. Their contracts were terminated for cause. Disloyalty, the letters said. Failure to maintain professional standards. I thought about Bryn sitting in my spot with her feet propped up, telling me change was good. I thought about the banner, the balloons, the cake, the way they'd laughed like my absence was something to celebrate. There's one more thing, Gemma said, her voice dropping. He left a note. It was posted in the main hall before they locked everything down. It said, "Loyalty is not optional. It is everything." That's all. Just that one sentence. We talked for a few more minutes, but there wasn't much else to say. After I hung up, I sat on my couch for an hour, trying to process what had happened. I hadn't orchestrated this. I hadn't called Carlyle or sent him information or manipulated anything. I'd simply stopped showing up after they threw me a goodbye party while I was still employed. Everything else had been his choice. His response to discovering that the people he'd trusted had discarded someone without even the basic courtesy of a proper termination. The story spread fast. Our industry was small, connected, insular. By Tuesday, everyone knew what had happened at the retreat. By Wednesday, I started getting calls from other establishments. They wanted to know if I was available. They wanted to know what I'd done to earn that kind of loyalty from Carlyle. I didn't know how to answer. I hadn't done anything except my job, day after day, for 8 years. I'd paid attention. I'd cared. Apparently, that was rare enough to be remarkable. One of the calls came from a place I'd heard about but never thought I'd work at, an estate that managed itself so privately that most people didn't even know it existed. The person on the phone introduced herself as Petra. "I work for a family that values discretion," she said. "We heard what happened with Carlyle and the retreat. We heard you were the reason he maintained his membership there for as long as he did. We'd like to speak with you about a position." "What kind of position?" I asked. "Similar to what you did before, but broader. We have 3 family members who require dedicated attention. The pay is triple what you were making. The benefits include housing on the property, but the expectation is absolute loyalty and complete discretion. What happens in this family stays in this family. Can you handle that?" I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Yes, we'll send a car for you tomorrow at 10. Dress comfortably. This is a conversation, not an interview." The call ended. I sat there, holding my phone, trying to understand how my life had shifted so completely in less than a week. I'd gone from being celebrated out of a job to being recruited for something that sounded extraordinary, and I hadn't done anything except refuse to pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The next day, a car arrived at exactly 10. Not a rideshare, an actual driver in a suit who opened the door for me and drove in complete silence for 40 minutes. We ended up at a property that made the retreat look modest. The main house was sprawling but understated, designed to blend into the landscape rather than dominate it. Petra met me at the entrance. She was maybe 50. With gray hair she wore in a simple bun and an expression that gave away nothing. "Welcome," she said. "Come with me." She led me through hallways lined with art that I recognized from museum catalogs. We ended up in a sitting room where an elderly woman waited, tea already poured. "This is Fallon," Petra said. "Fallon, this is Constance." Constance looked at me with eyes that were sharp despite her age. She had to be at least 80, but she sat perfectly upright, her hands folded in her lap. "Sit," she said. Not unkindly, just direct. I sat. "Carlyle called me," Constance said. "Told me what happened with his retreat. Told me you were the only person there who understood what loyalty meant. He said you never asked for anything, never complained, never made his needs about you. He said you simply did your job with integrity, and when they decided that wasn't valuable, you walked away rather than beg for a position they'd already given to someone else. Is that accurate?" "Yes," I said. "Why didn't you fight for your job? Why didn't you go to Carlyle and tell him what they'd done?" I thought about how to answer that, because it wasn't my place. My job was to serve him, not to involve him in workplace politics. If I'd gone to him and complained, I would have been using our relationship as leverage. That would have been its own kind of disloyalty. Constance smiled. It was small, barely there, but genuine. "You understand the difference between loyalty and manipulation. Most people don't. They think loyalty means using your connection to someone to benefit yourself. Real loyalty means honoring the relationship even when it costs you something." She picked up her tea and took a sip. "I need someone who understands that. My family has resources that make us targets. We need people around us who won't sell our privacy, who won't leak our information, who won't write books about us when they leave. Petra has been with us for 30 years. She's looking to retire in 5 years. We need someone she can train to take her place. Someone who will protect this family the way she has. Carlyle thinks you might be that person. What do you think?" I looked at Petra, who was watching me with an expression that might have been hope. I looked at Constance, who was waiting for an answer without any visible impatience. I thought about the retreat, about Carlyle, about 8 years of ironing newspapers and timing tea and folding towels in thirds. I thought about the banner that said, "Thanks for nothing," and the woman who'd sat in my spot with her feet up. I thought about how they'd all assumed I was disposable, right up until the moment they discovered I wasn't. "I think loyalty isn't something you claim," I said slowly. "It's something you prove, day after day, when nobody's watching, and there's no reward for it. I think if you give me the chance, I'll prove it to you the same way I proved it to Carlyle. Not with words, with action." Constance set down her tea. "You start Monday. Petra will show you to your quarters. Welcome to the family, Fallon." That first month at Constance's estate taught me what real wealth looked like. Not the kind that showed off, the kind that whispered, the kind that didn't need to prove anything because everyone who mattered already knew. Petra walked me through routines that made Carlyle's preferences look simple. Constance needed her medication at specific times, but the times changed based on her sleep patterns, which I had to track and predict. Her son needed complete silence in the mornings but became agitated if left alone for more than 2 hours in the afternoons. Her daughter traveled constantly and required someone to maintain her spaces exactly as she left them, down to the position of books on shelves. It was complex work, but I understood it. I understood that these weren't random demands. They were the architecture of how these people moved through their lives, and my job was to make that architecture invisible. To make everything feel effortless when it was actually the result of constant attention and adjustment. Petra watched me carefully those first few weeks. She'd appear in doorways while I was working, observing without comment. One afternoon, about 6 weeks in, she found me in the library reorganizing the daughter's book collection after her return from a trip. "You put the travel memoir on the left side," Petra said. "She reads them before bed," I replied, not looking up. "The lamp is on the left. She's right-handed, so she holds the book with her left hand and turns pages with her right. If the books she reads at night are on the right side, she has to reach across her body in the dark. This way is easier." Petra was quiet for a moment. "How did you know she reads them before bed?" "The spine creases are always in the same position, bottom third bent more than the top. That's how someone holds a book when they're lying down." Petra smiled. Actually smiled, which I'd only seen her do maybe twice. "You're gonna be just fine here." But while my new life was taking shape, My old one was collapsing in ways I didn't expect. 3 months after starting with Constance, I got an email from Bryn. The subject line said, "Please read." I almost deleted it. Almost. But something made me open it. "Fallon, I know you have no reason to help me. I know what happened, and I know it's my fault. But I'm asking anyway. I've applied to 17 positions in the last 3 months. Every single one has called Carlisle for a reference. He won't speak to them. He just has his assistant send a one-sentence response. I cannot recommend this person. I can't get hired anywhere. Not in hospitality, not in service, not even in retail management. Your name keeps coming up. People say you're working for someone important now. They say you have influence. I'm asking you to please tell someone I'm not a terrible person. I made a mistake. I laughed when I should have listened. I thought I knew better when I didn't know anything. I'm sorry. Please." I read it 3 times. I thought about her sitting in my spot with her feet up, telling me change was good. I thought about her laughing at Carlisle when he asked about his newspaper. I thought about how she'd called his needs ridiculous and outdated. Then I closed the email without responding. 2 weeks later, I got a call from someone I didn't recognize. When I answered, a man's voice said, "Is this Fallon? Who's asking?" "My name is Grant. I was the operations director at the retreat. I need to talk to you about what happened." I should have hung up. Instead, I said, "Talk. You destroyed 23 people's careers. You know that, right? You disappeared for 2 days and let an old man throw a tantrum that cost us everything. People have families, mortgages, children in school, and you just walked away and let it all burn." "I didn't let anything burn," I said. My voice was level, calm. "I stopped showing up after you threw me a party to celebrate getting rid of me. What happened after that was your choice. Yours and everyone who was at that party. We were cutting costs. You were expensive. It was a business decision. Then accept the business consequences. You decided I wasn't worth keeping. Carlisle decided you weren't worth keeping. That's how decisions work. You could fix this. I've been asking around. You're working for the Harrington family now. Everyone knows who they are. One word from you and people would hire us. One reference and we could rebuild. The Harrington family." I'd never actually heard Constance's full name until he said it. I'd never asked because it hadn't mattered. But apparently everyone in our industry knew exactly who they were. "You want me to risk my reputation to save yours?" I asked. "I want you to do the right thing. We made a mistake. We didn't know how much Carlisle valued you. If we'd known, we wouldn't have done it that way. That's the problem," I said quietly. "You would have kept me only because I was useful to someone powerful. Not because I'd earned it. Not because 8 years of perfect service meant anything. Just because firing me might have consequences. That's not loyalty. That's fear. And I don't work with people who only value me when they're afraid of what I might cost them." I hung up, blocked his number, sat there, shaking. Not from anger, but from something else. From the realization that I'd become exactly what they were afraid of. Someone with influence. Someone whose opinion mattered to people who could make or break careers. Over the next 6 months, I got 14 more emails. People from the party, asking for help, asking for references, asking me to explain to potential employers that they weren't bad people, just caught up in a situation they didn't understand. I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I was cruel, but because responding would have required me to lie. And I'd built my entire career on integrity. I couldn't honestly recommend people who'd celebrated my removal while I was standing right there. I couldn't vouch for their character when they'd shown me exactly what their character was. What I didn't expect was running into one of them. I was at a professional conference in the city, representing the Harrington family at a private event for estate managers and service professionals. These weren't public gatherings. You had to be invited. And the invitation only came if you worked for families that valued discretion. I was standing near the refreshment area when I saw her, the woman who'd worn the party hat. Her name was Leslie. She was serving drinks. Our eyes met. She went pale. I watched her recognition shift from surprise to embarrassment to something that looked like panic. She turned away quickly, but it was too late. I'd seen her. She'd seen me. We both understood what that moment meant. She was working service at an event where I was attending as a peer. The distance between us had become immeasurable. I didn't approach her. I didn't say anything. I just took a sparkling water and moved to another part of the room. But the encounter stayed with me. This was the real consequence. Not just unemployment, not just difficulty finding work, but the complete restructuring of professional hierarchy. She'd celebrated my departure, and now she was serving drinks, while I represented one of the most private families in the country. 6 months after that, Petra retired. There was a small ceremony, just family and a few key staff members. Constance gave a speech about 30 years of faithful service, about trust that had been earned and never broken. Then she turned to me. Petra has trained you well, Constance said. You understand what we need and why we need it. You've proven yourself trustworthy. As of today, you're taking her position fully. You'll manage this household and represent this family in all professional contexts. Your salary will reflect your new responsibilities, as will your authority. Welcome to the senior staff, Fallon. The room applauded. Petra hugged me, something she'd never done before. You earned this, she whispered. Not because of what happened to you before, because of who you are. That night, I sat in my quarters looking at my phone. There was another email from Bryn, another from Grant, another from 3 other people who'd been at the party, all asking for the same thing. Help, references, a word to someone who mattered. I had that power now. Constance had made it clear that my opinion carried weight, that if I vouched for someone, doors would open. I thought about what it would mean to respond, to say something kind about people who hadn't been kind to me, to give them the professional grace they'd denied. Me. Part of me wanted to be bigger than what they'd done, to prove I was better. But another part, the part that had spent 8 years ironing newspapers and timing tea and folding towels in thirds, knew something important. Loyalty wasn't just about being faithful to people. It was about being faithful to truth. And the truth was that these people had shown exactly who they were. They'd celebrated removing someone before that person was actually gone. They'd laughed at an elderly man's needs. They'd prioritized saving money over honoring commitment. I deleted every email without responding, not as punishment, but as honesty. I couldn't recommend people I didn't trust, and I didn't trust them. Carlisle had taught me that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Not because of grudges, but because trust is either there or it isn't, and once you've seen someone's character clearly, pretending you didn't see it is just another form of dishonesty. 5 years have passed since the party. I'm still with the Harrington family. Constance is 90 now, still sharp, still demanding excellence. Her children have families of their own, and I help manage those relationships too. I've trained 3 people to work under me, and I teach them the same things Petra taught me. Pay attention, care about details, understand that service isn't subservience, it's expertise. I see people from the retreat occasionally. Gemma and I have lunch every few months. She found work at another estate, and she's happy there. The 7 people who weren't at the party all landed on their feet. Good references from Carlisle meant something in our industry. The other 23 scattered. Some left hospitality entirely. Some moved to different cities where their reputation hadn't followed them. Bryn stopped emailing after the 3rd year. I heard she's working in property management now, not serving clients directly, not in a position where her judgment matters. Grant tried one more time, showing up at a professional event where he knew I'd be. Security removed him before he got close enough to speak to me. The Harrington family doesn't take chances with their privacy, and Constance made it clear that anyone who made me uncomfortable was unwelcome anywhere we operated. I keep Carlisle's letter in my drawer, the one he sent after everything happened. I take it out sometimes and read his words. They forgot that trust, once broken, cannot be rebuilt. He was right. But what he didn't say, what I've learned since, is that trust isn't just about what you do. It's about what you refuse to do. I refused to beg for a job after they threw me a party to celebrate my departure. I refused to involve Carlisle in workplace politics. I refused to recommend people I didn't trust. Each refusal built something stronger than any single action could have. It built a reputation that preceded me. It built influence that I never asked for, but earned through consistency. The revenge wasn't something I planned. It was something they created for themselves. They threw a party while I was still there. They hired someone who laughed at loyalty and called tradition ridiculous. They celebrated my end without bothering to understand what I'd been protecting all those years. And when Carlisle saw what they'd done, when he understood that they'd discarded someone who'd served him faithfully for 8 years without even the courtesy of a proper termination, he made his own choice. He didn't shut down the retreat because I asked him to. He shut it down because they showed him they didn't value the very thing he valued most. 23 people lost everything because they celebrated too early, because they assumed I didn't matter, because they thought service was just about following orders instead of understanding why the orders existed in the first place. And now, 5 years later, I'm in a position where they'd need my recommendation to work anywhere in this industry. The woman who wore the party hat serves drinks at events where I'm a guest. The operations director can't get hired because one sentence from me would open doors, but I won't say it. Bryn is somewhere managing properties instead of people because nobody trusts her judgment anymore. I didn't orchestrate any of it. I just stopped showing up after they made it clear I wasn't wanted. Everything else was consequences they earned themselves. That's the thing about loyalty. When you break it publicly, proudly, with balloons and cake and a banner that says, "Thanks for nothing," you don't get to be surprised when it costs you everything. You don't get to ask the person you betrayed to save you from what you did to yourself. They threw me a goodbye party while I was still working there. I let them celebrate, and then I let them discover exactly what my presence had been protecting them from all along. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it made you think about loyalty differently, or if you've ever been underestimated and proven everyone wrong, please share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me about your own experience with workplace betrayal, and subscribe, because stories like this, stories about quiet strength and consequences that unfold exactly as they should, matter. They remind us that sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do, it's what you refuse to do. It's walking away with your integrity intact and letting the truth speak for itself.
そうやって稼いで一応生活はなんとかかんとかやってきてるんです